Hello students, welcome back to the next lecture on classical electrodynamics, and today we have lecture number 11, and we have been discussing on the electric multipole expansion due to the arbitrary charge configuration. That is what we have done in the last two classes, and the purpose is quite clear, right? You have an arbitrary charge distribution in the space which is finite and localized, and due to that configuration of the charge, we are interested to know how the electric potential will look like at faraway distances. So that was our objective, and we have performed an infinite series calculation, namely the binomial series expansion, and we got the infinite terms. And also we have identified the meaning or uh, the interpretation of the each of the terms. So that's what we have seen, and here it is written down that, as you know, that the first term is going to correspond to the electric potential due to a monopole, and similarly the second term is due to a dipole, and so on. And the important property is that the potential will decay like 1 over r for the first term, it will decay like 1 over r square for the second term, and so on. And what is the interest here in faraway distances is the following. Suppose if you go far away, like something like, I am now here showing a number which is not having any units. I don't say it is 100 meter or 100 centimeter. The reason is that you are going to calculate r divided by r prime. The ratio only you are going to calculate before making the binomial expansion. So when you are making the ratio, this units will disappear. And if you're going to consider something like 100, the ratio, then what will happen to 1 divided by r cube? If the r is 10 to the power of 2, then 1 over r to the power 3 will be 10 to the power of minus 6. So if the 1 over r to the power 3 is like 10 to the minus 6, then what will happen to the fourth term, fifth term, etc.? So they will be like 1 over r to the power 4, 1 over r to the power 5, etc. And therefore, this particular term, each one of the successive terms in the binomial series will approach 0, like 10 to the power minus 8, 10 to the power minus 10, and so on. Therefore, even though you have an infinitely many terms in the electric potential expansion, practically what happens is we will be having dominant terms as the first two terms. So the dominant terms will be 1 over r and then 1 over r square, if you are going sufficiently far away. If you are not going to be sufficiently far away, then even the 1 over r power 3 term will be not negligible, and you may have to consider. So now you understand what is the reason for going far away. The primary reason is that the dominant term in the binomial expansion, we want to have only two of them, and the rest of the thing will approach 0, so you don't have to worry about. And the reason is that, and what is the interest behind is that you can easily achieve monopole configuration or a dipole configuration in an experiment, and in an experimental situation you can also eliminate the monopole term. How will you eliminate? Means suppose if you are going to have 10 charges, 10 charges you are going to have as a charge distribution. After the 10 charges, 5 of them are positive, that is plus q, and 5 of them are negative, that means minus q. Okay, consider that the magnitudes are equal. So you have plus 5q and minus 5q. So total number of charges are 10. So if 10 charges are distributed in space, and if you are going to perform the multipole expansion, what happens is that the monopole term will tend to 0, because the total charge is approaching 0, right? You have a plus 5q, then a minus 5q. So in this way, what happens is monopole term can be avoided if required. And then the entire contribution would be due to the dipole, which is quite natural because you have a plus 5q and minus 5q is there. So each one of the plus 1q and minus 1q, they will combine to form a dipole. And similarly, the second pair will be a second dipole, and ultimately we will be having 5 dipoles, etc. So as an example, I am telling, okay. So it is possible to have these two configurations in practice, and more importantly, if you are going to the magnetism case, for example, which means current distribution. In case we are going to talk about the current distribution, what happens is the magnetic monopole term goes to 0, unlike electric monopole case. Okay, electric monopole case, you see the electric potential doesn't go to 0 always. It doesn't go to 0. In some special cases it can go to 0, but in the case of the magnetic situation, what happens is the magnetic monopole is always zero. You don't have north pole separately. You also don't have south pole separately. You can't make it. So ultimately, it means to say that if at all any magnetic poles exist, it always exists together. Together means one north and one south. That means it is dipole. So naturally, what happens is dipole terms are something very interesting for practical applications, especially in the magnetic dipole cases. So similarly, electric dipole cases are also very interesting and important because when you are talking about the dielectric material, okay, electrically insulating material, what is interesting phenomena is that if you take an electrically insulating material and keep it in a uniform electric field, that is very simple, right? In an experiment, you can easily do it. You take a piece of insulating material and keep it in a uniform electric field. Then what happens is that this particular insulating material gets polarized. That is a phenomenon that you already know. What do you mean by polarization? Means it is the creation of the electric dipoles inside the dielectric material. That is the phenomenon of electric polarization, and which is quite familiar to you from your BSc or undergraduate studies. So essentially what happens inside the material is that the positive charges and the negative charges are slightly disturbed. Disturbed means slightly they move from their equilibrium position. They slightly move. Why they slightly move is because they are insulating material, they are not free to move. In the case of electrical conductors, the electrons are free to move. Therefore, all the electrons will be drifted away to the edge of the material. Edge of the material means the boundary of the material. If you are going to consider a spherical metallic ball, for example, then all the electrons will come to the boundary, because to that extent the electrons can move. It can't come outside the metal itself. Okay. So because the electrons are free to move in a metal, in the case of the electrical conductor like a metal, if you are going to keep the such a electrically conducting metal inside the uniform electric field, then what happens is that all the electrons will be pushed to one side, or at least on the boundary of the material. Okay, instead of saying one side, we can always say boundary of the material, so that will be a better terminology. So which means that in the case of the electrical conductor, all the charges will be pushed to the boundary, and therefore in the interior of the solid conductor, you will be having zero electric field. And this is quite known to you. And what happens exactly opposite it happens. I mean, such a situation doesn't happen in the case of the dielectric medium. In the case of the dielectric medium, the charges are not free to move. Because it is not free to move, we use the word bound electrons. Bounded electrons. Electrons are not free to move. So therefore what happens is, but at the same time, the electric field is pushing it. Electric field is pushing the electron, but electron is unable to move. Therefore, what happened is it slightly pushes and then it stays there. So this is your original position. But when somebody is pushing and I am now tied to the chair and the chair itself is fixed on the ground. So then what else I can do is I can only do this. That means it is slightly disturbed. So that means the plus charges will be moved one side and the minus charges will be slightly moved on the other side. Then what happens is there is a small separation distance between the positive and the negative charges, and that exactly what is known as the electric dipole. So electric dipoles are created means charges are not created. You can't create a charge or you cannot destroy it. Then what is the meaning of saying that the electric dipoles are created means already positive charges and negative charges are existing in the neutral material, electrically neutral material, which means I'm talking about any electrical insulating material, for example. Then what is happening because of the applied electric field is that the positive and the negative charges, they will move from their equilibrium position little away from each other. And that configuration is what we say that an electric dipoles are established inside the electrical insulator. That is a dielectric material. And therefore, now you come back to this particular board that now you see that you will be having a large collection of electrical dipoles. Okay, one pair is one dipole, right? In a material, you'll be having, of the order of 10 to the power 28 electrons per meter cube in the case of metals, and in the case of insulator, it will be little less. But in any case, you have a very large number of positive and negative charges in order to maintain neutrality, and therefore you will be having a large number of dipoles. And if you are going to have a large number of dipoles, then we will define a quantity called electric polarization. you simply find out what is the total number of dipoles, then you divide by the total volume. So number of dipoles divided by the volume is what is known as electric polarization. So this is the concept which is quite familiar to you and well known to you. Now the point to be noted is that you have to connect that particular information with the electric multipole expansion that we are performing. So even though you have infinitely many terms in the multipole expansion, the importance goes to the dipole terms, because practically you can have several dipoles in an electrically insulating dielectric materials. Therefore, you can study what is the electric field generated by these dipoles, or we say polarized object. So it is natural to ask this question, right? When a particular material is polarized, it means that it has several dipoles. Then the question comes, what is the electric field generated by these dipoles? The question is very quite natural, right? So it is similar to asking a question. You have a sunlight. Then you put a convex lens, and then you focus the light to the paper. Then what happens? The heat generated by the sun, whatever the sunlight, that is focused, and then the paper gets catches fire. Then what happens is the sunlight is giving us a light intensity. So you have a brightness, right? So that light intensity is there due to sun. Now what happened is, because of your experiment, the paper got or caught the fire, and therefore this fire is now generating additional light. You get extra light, right? The original light is coming from the sun, plus you have the light which is generated by this paper, burning paper. So, and you can very easily, there is one thing that is clear, that the light intensity due to the burning paper is going to be very, very small in comparison to the light intensity received from the sun. That is clear. And similarly, the story here is also same. What is the story is, the electric field that caused the polarization is very high, whereas the electric field generated by these dipoles are going to be very feeble, very little. But however little it is, we are interested to calculate what is the electric field generated by the dipole. So that point is clear, right? You have two electric fields. One is the electric field that caused the polarization, and second one is the electric field generated by these polarized dipoles. So the second one is going to be very small electric field, but even then we want to calculate what is its value. So that is our today's objective. Today's class we are going to establish, or we are trying to calculate what is the electric field generated by a polarized object. Polarized object means dielectric material got polarized. How it got polarized means due to an external electric field which is applied, and that applied field will be a much stronger electric field. We are not interested to know what is the value of that electric field. Only thing is, it got polarized, and you got the dipoles readily available with you. Only thing is, because of that dipole, what is the electric field at some other distance away from the material? That is the question. Now coming back to another point, that calculation of the electric field, when compared to directly calculating the electric field, it is convenient to calculate the electric potential. Even the question says that you calculate electric field, we don't do it directly. Instead of that, we first to calculate the electric potential. Now, why do you want to do like that is, electric potential is a scalar quantity. Electric field is a vector quantity. See, computing vector is a little difficult, right? It's three-dimensional. Electric potential is scalar, only one value you will have to calculate. Therefore, what happens is, even though the question says that you calculate the electric field, we don't calculate the electric field in the first instance. Rather, we calculate the electric potential first of all, and then apply the relation electric field equal to the negative gradient of the potential. So finish the calculation and perform one gradient operator. That is much better, or that is much comfortable than directly calculating the electric field using the Coulomb's law. So this is the story, and therefore we are going to let us now go back to the board and then see what was the term that is written in the yesterday's class. We have written, I think, for at least 4 terms we have written. First, second, third, and fourth terms. And out of the 4 terms, let us remember what is the second term and then take it and then write it down. That is the term that is going to correspond to the electric dipole. And then we have to draw an appropriate diagram. Of course, not new. It will be very similar, but I would like to emphasize that diagram has to be written for clarity. And once you have that, the rest of the calculation is only rearranging the terms and then applying some of the product rules of vector calculus. So the calculation is going to be fairly simple, provided you got the overall idea about this. Okay, so let me go to the board and then explain. So here it is. We have the from the last class work, we have the electric potential due to a dipole is given by this particular term. So this is only second term. So this I have written here, right? Second term. Therefore, which means n equal to 1. So 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught, etc. Everything is there. And then you have this. I think in the last class, I forgot to write only cos gamma term. Everything else was there. All these things were there. But I think cos gamma was missing in the yesterday's, I mean the term that I was writing. Other terms were right. Okay, only the second term cos gamma was missing. So if you observe that, you make a note in your class notes. Okay. So this is the starting point that we collect, or we take only the second term from our last class, and then we start with this. So this is how you start. Now, how do you want to proceed is that the rest of the calculation is simple. It is a kind of rearranging the terms and then performing a what do you call the application of the vector calculus rules. It could be applying a theorem, or it could be applying the product rule. That's what we are going to do. Now, how do you understand this particular expression r prime cos gamma? So that is the thing that we are going to see. In some books, gamma can be written down as alpha. That is only matter of preference. See, why people prefer alpha here is that this is r is there. R and gamma will look somewhat similar. So you have to be careful to write in such a way that r looks much different from gamma. If you are unable to write in that way, then you change this gamma to alpha. That's why some textbooks, especially in the Griffiths book, you can see alpha here. But in printing, of course, there is much difference. And R and gamma will look quite different. So if you are able to write distinctly, it's fine. Okay. So here I'm maintaining gamma here. So R is different, and the R and gamma should look considerably different. So okay, that's fine. So coming to the point, R prime and cos gamma, how can we rewrite is like this? Now both of them are scalars. So we can write like this. We can consider this as a dot product between two vectors. So what should be r dot r prime? How do you write like this? Modulus of r prime and cos gamma. So therefore, you have the modulus of r prime is there here. That is there here. So that's why I'm putting a tick. Similarly, cos gamma is also there. But however, this r is not there in the expression. You see, this particular r is not there in the expression. Therefore, this length or this modulus should become 1. If it becomes 1, then no problem. Okay, there is a 1 is always there. 1 into is there. So somehow this has to disappear, which means that you don't consider r vector, but instead you consider r cap unit vector. So if you consider this to be a unit vector, then what happens is now we can write down that it is modulus of r cap. Modulus of r cap means 1, right? That is why. Then into the rest of the thing is same. As you can see that the product gives you r prime cos gamma, and we have an r prime cos gamma. So that is the idea, and based on this idea, we can put back this here, the vector notation, namely r cap dot r vector. I want to substitute here. So therefore, let me now write down. So from the equation number 1 I have given, and then I would like to substitute and then write what happens here. So all the things are same. So simply you'll have to write down. Maybe I'll, yeah. So that is the thing. R cap dot r prime. This expression you'll be writing down, and then the rest of the thing is same. You simply write down this particular d omega prime. And once that is over, then we will be we have to recognize now that this is a vector quantity. So that's what I would like to show here. So what I'm trying to show is that this is it is a dot product of the two vectors. So we have to recognize this entire expression as the product of two vectors. You have to now identify. So we are going to rearrange like that. How are you going to rearrange is this? You have an r cap. This is important. You have r cap, but the integration is with respect to the primed variable. Therefore, there is no business for the unprimed variable inside. Therefore, we can take it outside there. So that is why the r cap can be written down here, and it is combined with this r. So r cap, r, they have nothing to do with the primed variable. So it all came outside the integral. Then what is inside the integral is only primed quantities that are there here. So that's nice, but here is the very important point. You see that what happened to the dot product. So that is a place where you have to focus. This quantity, which I am showing right now, this quantity is a vector quantity because there is a cap here. That this is a vector quantity. Then what about this one? Now this quantity is also a vector quantity because there is a arrow here. Okay, that this arrow. So this is coming. So the integral quantity is a vector quantity, and this side quantity is also vector quantity. So two vector quantities are there, and therefore the dot has to be put here carefully. So if you forget this, then the entire expression is wrong. Okay, you can't have a vector multiplication without dot and without cross. So that is the point, and therefore I'll put a dot here. So this is very important. You are now recognizing that the two sides of the dot, or each one of them, are vector quantities, and therefore the dot is standing there, okay, in between the constant and other integral. So that is a point to be noted. And once that is clear, we will give a particular name for this particular vector quantity. The integral of whatever you have is a vector. That is clear. That's clear. But then we can, if you give some symbol or some name, it will be better that we can proceed further like this. So that is fine. So now what we are planning to do is that let us give some particular symbol for the integral. So let me say that we will call this the electric dipole moment. So basically you are now seeing the definition for the electric dipole moment. Okay. So this is how we define. Okay. So it is not that you already have the definition and then that we are writing. Now, when we are performing the expression or expansion, we are getting this kind of a term, and we are going to give the definition that let this be defined as the electric dipole moment. And you'll have to see the small letter p. Okay, that's important. And if it is the case, the rest of the thing looks quite simple, that V of r is going to look like this. So the point to be noted is that you'll have to observe the small letter. We are going to use both capital letter and small letter. So this is very important. Small letter means electric dipole moment. Capital letter means electric polarization. And they are related to each other. Polarization is equal to the number of dipole moments divided by the volume. So they are related, and therefore you should know the distinction between them. Okay, both of them are not identically same. So small p divided by the volume, small p divided by volume, that is for the polarization. Only thing is that small p represents a single dipole, but if you are going to have n number of dipole, you multiply by n. So that's all about it. So total dipole moment divided by volume will be polarization. Polarization is capital P. So that is clear. Now, if that is the case, how do you write is this entire integration that you have here becomes a small p vector. And then, so this is p vector, then we have a dot p, that is the meaning. But anyway, dot product can be interchanged, right? Whether it is r dot p or p dot r, they are the same. And therefore we can write in any way you like, doesn't matter. And since we are going to consider r by r square as a combination, okay, we are going to consider r by r square as a term for the further discussion. So whether you want to write p dot r or r dot p, it's all fine, no problem. And let us therefore proceed how to understand this r by r square. This term is, let us keep this because we are going to come back after understanding r by r square term. And which diagram we will have to use to understand the symbols r is that the same diagram that we were using in the yesterday's class, because from the same yesterday's class work only you have taken the second term, right? Therefore, the diagram showing the r vector and r prime vector will be the same as that we used in the last class lecture. Because without diagram, keeping some equation has no meaning if you want to understand. So you have to be careful. What is the meaning of r? So for that purpose, you need a diagram. So once that is clear, the meaning is already explained. So I am simply writing this. The meaning is that this particular expression that is highlighted is the electric potential due to the dipole, which is having a dipole moment p vector, and it is valid only at large distances, as I already explained. So whatever I explained, some of the points I'm just writing down so that it will be comfortable for you to make notes. Okay, that is fine. So now what we will do is we also remember the quadratic and not quadratic. It's a quadruple moment and the octuple moment. They will be proportional to 1 over r cube and r power 4. So just for information, we can keep it aside. Okay. And that's it. So let us therefore understand the r divided by r square. How do you understand? Let us do some calculation. So this is already explained. So today's work plan is that we are interested to calculate the electric potential due to the polarized object. That's all. This is our today's objective. And here, what is the meaning is the polarized object means the polarized object has what? This entire thing has to come here, has a distribution of electric dipoles. That is what is known as a polarized object. Polarized object means you have a dielectric material that contains a collection of electric dipoles. That is what I mean to say. That is the meaning of that. And then you already know how to create a polarized object. We can create the polarized object by placing the electrically insulating material in a uniform electric field. In a uniform electric field. Okay, now let us put the symbol. I already told that polarization is capital P. So let us introduce that capital P now. We will denote the polarization by the capital letter P. And as usual, of course, the definition I already told you. So probably I will write down the definition here. So polarization is nothing but the number of dipoles divided by volume. And that means, the other things you already know. Number of dipoles. Each dipole is Q times D, right? So what will be the corresponding unit? Q times D means coulomb meter. So I have coulomb, then you have to the power meter to the minus 2. So this is the dimension corresponding to the polarization. It is important because later, after finishing the calculation, you should know whether the appropriate dimensions are matching or not. Otherwise, you are making a mistake. So because capital P and small p are there, I would like to show this clearly. So capital P is clear to you. Now let us do it for small p. So for the case of the small p, what happens is the dipole moment is the small letter p, and which is nothing but the charge multiplied by the distance. And therefore the typical dimension will be coulomb multiplied by meter. That's all. So you see that now it is coulomb multiplied by meter to the power 1. In the case of the previous one, here this is the previous one, you have meter to the power minus 2. So there is a difference between the capital letter and the small letter. This is useful to understand that at the end of the expression we will have both capital P and small p. Okay. So now let us draw an appropriate geometrical diagram. Geometrical diagram means diagram showing r vector and r prime vector. So that is quite simple. There is nothing new here. A similar diagram that we are going to draw what we have done for the last class. So therefore I will bring the similar diagram from the last class work. Similar diagram I am going to bring. And only thing is, this is the difference. You see that omega prime is the place where you have to see. Okay, here this omega prime, it is not the collection of charges. Okay, but instead we are going to say that it is a collection of dipoles. That is the difference between the last class work and this class work. Okay, in the last class I said that it is the collection of electric charges. Now it is not so. So keep this difference mainly. This particular region does not contain electric charges. Rather, it contains collection of electric dipoles, which means that this is an electrically insulating material got polarized. That is kind of object. So again, because this is the source term, it is represented by omega prime, means it is the region of volume. Okay, it is a region of volume is known as omega. Charged region means anyway plus minus is there in dipole, therefore it is known as the prime. The rest of the thing diagram, everything looks same. The only thing is that rather than saying that this is charge density, now you will have to say that this is dipole density. So that is the idea that you should have, and once that is clear, we will proceed further, and let us give the symbol, the usual script letter R, that is useful for this. And we are interested to calculate, or we'll say what is the interest is that we are interested to determine the electric potential due to the polarized object. At this particular point. Maybe I will give the point name as A, for example. A, let it be the point. So that is the object. So our objective should be clear, that we are interested to calculate the electric potential due to polarized object. So how are you going to start with is that let us start with the equation. I think the first equation that we have, right? So let us start with the equation that we started with, namely this one. Yeah, this is correct. So let us give some number like 1, I don't know, 1 or 2. Okay, I have given 1 there. So let me erase and put it 2 here. So equation number 2 would be the starting point for you. So therefore, let us start with the equation number 2 to perform the calculation. Okay, once that is clear, now you simply have to write down that expression. I think you have the small letter p, right? You have a small letter p vector. No, that must be a small letter. Then you have a dot r cap divided by r square. And the point to be noted is that this is for a single dipole. So you have to make sure that we have to integrate. Okay, the expression is valid for a single dipole, not for the collection. So for the collection of dipoles, we have to integrate it over the entire region of space. That is the meaning. So this point also I will write down, that when you are dealing with a single dipole, you have the small letter p. And when we are going to have a collection of dipoles, we will be dealing with the polarization capital P. Okay, and then we have to now integrate now. Okay, so let us perform the integration. So whatever expression that you have written is the electric potential due to single dipole, and you can now observe that small letter p is there. That is fine, and we will now perform the integration so that we will be getting the total electric potential. That means due to the entire polarized object. Okay, due to the polarized object will be given by, you simply write down the same expression, V of r equal to 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught into integral over. Now we are putting integral. So the integral is over the omega prime, and now you put the capital P, which is a function of r prime. Then you have dot r cap divided by r square. Then other things are same, d omega prime. So the difference between the previous expression and this expression is only the integration. So that is quite clear that you perform the integration here. The small p becomes capital P. This dot is anyway there. Then we have r by r square is there. And the integration has to be performed over the region where the polarized material is present. That is what it means to say. And the rest of the thing is clear. And now we will see how we are going to deal with the r by r square. Okay, so let me just finish my explanation, whatever I told. Okay, so now we will write down this expression as, we will say that this is integration of the P of r. Of course, I am not doing anything. It's all same thing. Just for clarity, I would like to separate r by r square. That's all about it. Then d omega prime. Yeah. So here what I would like to know is that I just made a clear distinction that we are going to pay attention to the r by r square. So I put a bracket. Okay, it is identically same expression. Now this r by r square we will evaluate. Let us go back to a different screen. Maybe here the space is not there. And then what is the meaning of 1 over r square? And how to get r cap by r square by taking its gradient, because gradient is a vector quantity. 1 over r square is a scalar quantity. That's what you have to note down. 1 over r square is a scalar quantity, right? If you take the gradient of the scalar, I'll get a vector. So let me therefore go to a different place, say rough board, for example, rough work place, and then we will consider this quantity. Which quantity we are considering is the scalar quantity 1 by r square. And let us evaluate its gradient. And here the point to be noted is that the gradient can be performed with respect to the unprimed variable, or we say unprimed coordinate system. And once again you can perform the gradient with respect to the primed variable. So there is no difficulty. It's just in statement it looks as if it is difficult. Therefore I will write down here that primed and unprimed is visible from the script r, right? You have both primed and unprimed. So I can perform the derivative with respect to the primed and unprimed. And the rest of the calculation is quite simple. You already know the standard definition for the del operator. And this is what is known as unprimed variable. You don't have x prime, you don't have y prime. But now you put the prime. Okay, then how the prime will look like? So then I will say that del prime operator will be, you put the corresponding prime for x, then dou by dou x prime, like that. That means you understand what you mean to say, that you are performing the derivative in the derivative is performed with in the polarized object. That is the meaning. Primed region means. Unprimed region means I am performing the derivative at the place where we are performing the or measuring the electric potential. So the point is that they are not the same because of the because r minus r prime is there, right? So naturally you can understand one derivative is not the same as the other derivative. So therefore let me write down the distance between 2 points formula. That is what is the script r, right? The distance between the 2 points is given by the square root of x minus x prime whole square plus etc. So the rest of the calculation is going to be simple, and you only have to perform the differentiation with respect to x, y and z. So if this is your script r, then what will be 1 divided by script r? So it is only inverse of that. So I don't want to write the entire expression. So put a bracket like that, and power is minus of. Okay. So what I'm trying to say is that I don't want to write the entire of square root of all these things. I don't want to write, and therefore I will symbolically say that this kind of a bracket will represent the entire expression, and then of course the square root and other things are taken care, and then power is written down. So whatever is there in the highlighting, excepting that square root, that is the quantity inside the bracket, so that we can avoid writing down the expression repeatedly. So if that is clear, now we will perform the differentiation with respect to x, y and z, and that is what is known as the gradient. So therefore I will write down that the gradient of 1 over r will be given by the x unit vector, and differentiate now. I'll get minus half into the same thing to the power minus 3 by 2. Then I'll get 2 times x minus x prime, and that's all. And now repeat the derivative with respect to the y. This time it is 2 into y minus y prime plus now the derivative with respect to the z. And that's all. The simplification is going to be quite comfortable because you have power to the power minus 3 by 2 is common. So the remaining terms, let me write down. You have y minus y prime ay cap plus the same term, because the common term is going to be in the denominator. So I'll put the common term in the denominator. So that line is not good. So this divided by, you have this entire expression, bracket is to the power plus 3 by 2 now. Okay, so that is what is common. That is why it happened like that. Now you are allowed to recognize what is the numerator. So are you able to recognize what is numerator? So that is the point. The numerator is just, what is the numerator is just the script or vector. That is what you recognize. And not only that, what about denominator? Denominator is also a scalar, right? So the numerator is a vector, denominator is a scalar, and then power half and then power 1 can be combined. So this is, I just want to tell you that how can you get power 3 by 2? You can decompose, because you see the script r has a power half. Script r has a power half, right? So that is a power half, and therefore we can decompose the power 3 by 2 into 1 by 2 and 1. That's what I'm trying to say. So if you can now substitute all these things, we get we can write like r square multiplied by r, so that you get power 3 by 2 now. And that's all. Now the simplification is looking nice. So the gradient of 1 over r is equal to minus of the r cap by r square. So this is our first result. Okay, we will say that this is the first result. Maybe I will give the name something like R1. R1 means result 1. And we got the result by differentiation with respect to x, y, z. Now if you repeat it, so let us not repeat, but rather I will write down similarly. Okay, so if you can repeat it with respect to x prime, y prime, z prime, then a similar result can be obtained. So I will write down similarly. We will write down that it is a del prime of the same quantity 1 over r will be given by plus r cap by r square. So there is a small difference. Minus is becoming plus. So the differentiations are quite simple, and therefore you can get this expression. Now remember this particular expression, namely the second expression. When we will go back to our original board, our original discussion, let us go back. So where was that? Will come down. So here you have the r cap by r square, right? So because of that place only we are now coming. So this is the place where you have. So let me we'll put a circle, and this is exactly nothing but you have a del prime of 1 over r. So that is what we are trying to recognize. So once you recognize this, actually you don't have to do all this rough work calculation. We can directly substitute. Okay, once that is clear, we have the polarization vector, then dot. Now you write down that this is del prime of 1 over r. So that means the equation looks somewhat better, which means that it is looking like the integral of the derivative. So that is the idea. So you see that this is an integral and this is a derivative. So integral of derivative, that looks nice, right? Because everything is with respect to the primed coordinate. Integration is also with respect to the primed coordinate. Differentiation is also with respect to the primed coordinate. So therefore this is one thing. And another reason why we are going to use like this is that we can try to obtain the Gauss divergence theorem can be applied if there is a del dot operator. So you should remember what is the idea of doing this kind of gymnastics here. The reason is that when you are going to have the divergence, we can apply the Gauss divergence theorem. But for that we need a divergence. Divergence means what? A del dot. You don't have del dot. It is gradient operator. So therefore, now once again you look back into the rules of the vector calculus, or what is known as the product rules of the vector calculus, and then we will try to figure out whether any product rule of the vector calculus will help you to convert this expression into divergence of something. That is the aim. So keeping this kind of aim, let us try to do some algebra further. So the point should be clear. What is that we are trying to do? Sorry, this is over. Yeah. So what I'm trying to do is that we will search for some product rule in the vector calculus, so as to rewrite this in terms of some divergence. So for that purpose, once again, remember, let us do some work. The rough work again. So which product rule is going to be more suitable so that we need to know. So therefore, let us go back to the rough work board. And then you consider a product rule like this. Let us have a scalar f and a vector a. Okay, then what happens is out of the several product rules, one of the rules is that the divergence of the f times a is given by f times divergence of a plus a dot gradient of f. Of course, this is not a difficult thing. Looks like that, but if you know the standard rule for the UV differentiation product rule, it's similar to that. D by dx of UV, how do you write? It is like UV prime plus V into U prime. That is what exactly is this. What I mean to say is, what I'm trying to say is that here the operator is d by dx operator. Here the operator is the divergence operator. Similar differentiation operator is there. So therefore, the first quantity into the operator operating on second object plus second object into operator operating on first object. That is what it means. So here the operator is a divergence operator, or we say del operator better, not divergence, we'll say del operator. So now what happened is this is the first, so we have a first element multiplied by, so the first element is there, first element multiplied by operator operating on the second element. Second element is A. So here only you have to be careful. When an operator is operating on this, you have three options are there. Del operator can operate like gradient. Del operator will operate on like divergence. Del operator also will operate like cross product. That means curl, del cross A. Three options are there. So you have to now you'll have to think which one of the operators will fit into the given problem. So that should be clear to you. And since this entire expression is the divergence, ultimately I need a scalar quantity. So that should be visible in your mind. And if it is the case, del cross of A and all that kind of thing cannot come here. That option is not there. No, del cross means ultimately vector will come. So the final expression we want like a scalar. Okay, we want like a scalar means the entire expression is a divergence operator. And therefore, you cannot get a del cross. That is first point. Second point is you also cannot have a gradient of A. Gradient cannot operate on a vector. Therefore, that option is also not there. So that is how you can decide how the operator will operate on the second thing. So that is clear. Then plus the second object is A. Then into, this into is the place where confusion comes. Therefore, you forget whether it is dot or cross product. Let us keep it. Then, so second object into the operator operating on the first element. So since the first element is a scalar object, divergence is not possible, curl also not possible. So only possibility is gradient. That's the only possibility. So gradient of f is a vector quantity. This A is also a vector quantity, but I want finally a scalar quantity. So only option for you is to put a dot here. So therefore, of course, anyway, there are several product rules are there which you are going to memorize, but it is not that you are closing the eye and then simply you are memorizing without understanding. So there is some understanding going on here, and which is also very similar to this. So you can't make mistakes just like that. If you understand how the dots and the gradients are appearing in this particular scenario. Now that is the point, and that is first thing. And the second thing is that of course this is a divergence. I think this dot is missing, right? This is a divergence operator. I forgot to put a dot. Okay, so that is what I have been telling, that we need a scalar ultimately. So once this is clear, now what we have to do is we have to compare the expression that we have right now in our polarization. So you should remember from which place we came here. Okay, so we have this quantity. So what is the quantity is polarization dot. So you have a capital P dot gradient prime of 1 over R. So that is what we had an expression, and then we are interested to rewrite that. So remembering that only we came here, and therefore we'll have to try to identify what is possible. Now we can consider like this. We can consider capital A to be the capital P vector, and then we can consider F to be 1 over R, because F is scalar, right? So 1 over R is also scalar. So if you identify this is this situation, now we can write down the entire expression in a very simple way like this. Sorry, F means 1 by R. Okay. And then A means capital P. Then again 1 by R. Then we get divergence prime. Now divergence is divergence prime. Okay. And rest of the thing is same. Yeah. So here the point to be noted is remember that If this is del dot, then everywhere del dot. So if this is gradient, then this is gradient, then this is gradient. Suppose if this is del prime, okay, suppose if this is del prime operator, this also will be a del prime operator, that also will be del prime operator. That's all about it. So it is an operator operating on, whether it is del also, the same rule is valid, del prime also, same rule is valid. That is a point to be noted. And therefore, when we are trying to map this particular expression, so how do you compare? Means you compare this one with this one. So we can say that A is P, and then the gradient is gradient prime, and then F means 1 by R. So that kind of mapping if you have, then the entire expression can be rewritten like that. So therefore, what is an advantage? Ultimately, what did you achieve is that now you see that I am getting a divergence. So we are able to rewrite this expression in terms of divergence of polarization. So when you have a divergence of certain object here, we are in a place that we can apply the Gauss divergence theorem. So that is the idea. That is the idea behind this. So once you understand the reason for doing this kind of play around this vectors, now we note down this and let us go back. So we need this particular quantity to be rewritten. So let us rewrite and then take this to the original board. So take the second term to the left side and then write down. So first term is, you have del prime. Okay, that is del prime. 1 over R times capital P vector. Then minus, you bring it to the left side so that I'll be having whatever is required. So whatever is required, I have already shown in yellow color. Okay, that is this one. And then we will take this entire expression to the place where we were discussing the polarization. So let me highlight. This is the result we want. So let us copy this result, because here only we need, here. So in this place we need this particular expression. So let us use this. So if you substitute that, what happens is it looks like this. Now it becomes two terms, isn't it? Single term has become two terms. So I have to write down two expressions. So first expression is the integral omega prime. Then you have a del prime dot. Then 1 over RP means P by R I can write. It's okay, anyway you write. And then you have a d omega prime. That is your first expression. Then you have a minus, second expression you write down 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught into integral over omega prime. Then you have that minus, better to take inside. So let me make plus here. Then I will write down minus of the del prime dot P divided by R. Then you have a d omega prime. And that's it. So now we have rewritten as two integrals. The advantage is already known to you, that we will be in a position to apply the Gauss divergence theorem. So let us consider the first integral. First integral looks like Gauss divergence theorem. That's why. So let us see which is the first integral. I will highlight. Okay, we are not going to apply for both of them. We are going to apply only for the first integral. So I will just highlight and show where we are going to apply. So you have the divergence of P dot R, that integral. So for that purpose, at least you should now refresh. Anyway, you know all these things. Gauss divergence theorem, you know. But at least I would like to write down how the theorem looks like so that it is easy. So I will now write down how the Gauss divergence theorem looks like. It is the volume integral of the divergence of A, which will be equal to the surface integral of the normal component of A. A dot ds means normal component. So that can be rewritten. How do you understand normal component means? We can write like this. A dot, you put a unit vector, then you make that as a scalar quantity. So the vector has been written as a scalar multiplied by unit vector. That's all about it. So here, this is the usual way to write down for the Gauss divergence theorem. But while you are reading this one, how do you read is the surface integral of the normal component of A, like that you have to read. Now, how do you know that this is normal component? Means that this particular surface area means it's a vector quantity. So that means surface area scalar multiplied by the normal to the surface. So the normal to the surface is called the unit vector perpendicular to the surface. That is the meaning. Normal to the surface means unit vector perpendicular to the surface. Okay, if you are going to stand on a floor, then the floor is the ds, and you are standing vertically upright, that is the unit vector. So in the direction from your foot to your head, that you put an arrow, that will be the unit vector. So that is the meaning of normal. So if the surface is slanted, you also will be perpendicular to that. That is the meaning of that. Therefore, what happens is, naturally, the entire A vector will not come into the integration. Entire A vector will not come. Instead of that, only the normal component, because you can always decompose the vector into two components. One is perpendicular component and parallel component. So the parallel component of the A vector will not enter into the calculation. That is the meaning. Anything that is entering into the calculation of this integration will be only perpendicular component of the A vector. That is called a normal component. And that is equal to the volume integral of the divergence. Okay, so that is what is the statement of the Gauss divergence theorem. And right now we have this expression is available with us in terms of polarization. And we are going to convert. Convert means we are going to delete this volume integral and write down equivalent surface integral. This is what we are going to write down. Therefore, you make a note of this, or you write down. Since you are writing down means there is no problem. Otherwise, you just remember this is what we are going to write down, and then we will go back to the original calculation. So therefore, we have the V of r vector will be equal to, the first term is 1 over 4 pi epsilon naught integral. Now we are going to write it as a closed surface integral. Then write down the normal component. Which vector is P vector is the A vector now. P dot n divided by r. And that's all. Now the surface area is ds. So we have finished applying the Gauss divergence theorem, and for the second term we are not going to do anything. So I'm going to copy it. Simply copy it. So integral of the entire thing. And that's it. This minus of the divergence of P, you keep it as a single quantity, then divided by r and d omega prime. So we have almost done the calculation. Almost, we have finished by 95% of our calculation. Only thing is that we would like to interpret what is the meaning of this equation. So for that purpose, let us recall. It's quite simple. Only thing is you have to recognize. Recall means you are going to recognize. So now the question is, are you able to recognize this with Coulomb's law? I am writing Coulomb's law only for the electric potential. That means if you have a charge density, then you have at a distance r, then we are integrating over the omega. So now this is the expression for the Coulomb's law. There is nothing new here, whatever I have written in the green color. So the question is this: are you able to recognize this Coulomb's law with the two of the expression? That is, what I am asking is, are you able to recognize that the green color expression is matching with the first integral? That is question number 1. Question number 2 is, same question you again ask. Are you able to recognize that the same green color expression is also appearing in the second integral? Are they looking similar? That is what I mean to ask. And if you say yes, that means yes, we are able to recognize that each one of them corresponds to the Coulomb's law. Now, how do you recognize that is that if you see the integral, you have the integral is divided by r. 1 over r is there. There's a 1 over r is there. Here also 1 over r is there. So therefore that is clear. 1 by 4 pi epsilon naught is there in all the places. That is also fine. Coming to the integral, if the region of integration is a volume, then the integration is over a volume. So that is there here. If the region of integration is volume, the integral has to be performed over the volume. But instead, if the region of the charge distribution happens to be a surface, okay, you can also distribute the charges on a plate, right, on a sheet of paper. In that case, you can't do any volume there. So if the charges are spread out, charges means this row of r prime. If the charges are spread out on a sheet of paper, then the integration has to be done on the surface only. You can't do it on a volume. And therefore, in that case, the integral has to be performed on the entire surface. And that is what we mean to say a closed one. So therefore, it is everywhere, it is clear that the Coulomb's law will take care of this naturally. It is not that all the time Coulomb law is valid only for volume. It is valid for the line integral, it's valid for surface integral, also for the volume. So therefore, when you compare this, all the things are matching, and therefore each one of the integral, that means the first integral and the second integral, each one of them is equivalent to the electric potential given by the Coulomb's law. So this is our observation, but then you are going to identify, so everything is same. Then what is this rho of r? Rho of r represent the charge distribution in the Coulomb's law. And here if you come, if you put the entire thing, suppose P dot n, if you delete P dot n and say that that is some charge density, then these two looks very similar. And therefore our understanding, or how do we interpret this mathematical equation, is that P dot n represents charge density. So this is the physical conclusion coming from mathematics. So you have done some gymnastics using the vector calculus rules. That's all fine. But ultimately, what are you understanding? Our understanding is that capital P dot n. What is the meaning of capital P dot n? P is electric polarization vector. Electric polarization, if you take the normal component, that means perpendicular component of the electric polarization, perpendicular to what? Perpendicular to the surface. You must have a surface, then only you can talk whether parallel, perpendicular. Okay. For this surface, you find out what is the perpendicular component, and then that quantity is going to act like a charge density in the first case. And come to the second case. In the second case also very similar situation is happening, that this quantity should behave like a charge density. Of course, charge density can be minus or plus, you know, right? You have two flavors of the charge. So both plus and minus are accepted. So therefore, now this time what happens is the value of the charge density is given by the divergence of the polarization vector. And of course, polarization, you remember, polarization is a function of r prime. Isn't it? Why it is a function of r prime means wherever the charges are present or the dipoles are present, those regions are primed region. And therefore, the derivative has to be with respect to the primed variable. That is how it comes naturally. So when you are performing the differentiation in the place where the dipoles are present, those derivatives should also corresponding to the primed variable. So it is quite natural to have a del prime. So therefore, ultimately what is our understanding is, if you evaluate the divergence of the polarization and attach a minus sign, that corresponds to the charge density for the second integration. So therefore our conclusion is quite simple, that the first term represents the first term, because remember total thing is electric potential. Therefore first term denotes the electric potential due to P dot n, and the second integration represents the electric potential due to minus divergence of polarization. And that is the conclusion. So therefore, once the understanding is clear, I will write down whatever I explained now. So let me therefore highlight what is that we are going to give the importance. The P dot n is going to be identified. Each one of the highlighted quantity is going to be identified as a charge density. So that is an important conclusion, and therefore let us write down. Let me remove the Coulomb's law. This is anyway clear to you. And now in order to write the conclusion, let me say that let us define. Define means what? Whether you are defining or something like renaming, it is the same thing. We are going to give a different name, renaming. What are you going to rename is P dot n should be equal to some charge density. That symbol is sigma I am using. Sigma is, the surface charge density. And similarly, the divergence can be another charge density, but this time I will say it is rho. And of course, the reason why how do you know that sigma or rho means anything you can use, but there is a general convention. Sigma means surface charge density, rho means volume charge density, lambda means linear charge density. So it is some kind of standard terminology, and you see that this is a surface. So because this is a surface, the charge density should be a surface charge density. So that is why P dot n I am keeping this kind of a symbol. And coming here, the integration is over the volume. And therefore, this particular charge density should be spread over the entire volume. And therefore, it is better to use rho here. Rho means volume charge density. Sigma means surface charge density. But then the question comes, what is this suffix B here? So the B is the suffix that is used for bound charges. In the very beginning of today's class, I explained that the electrons or the charges inside the dielectric material cannot freely move If it cannot move freely, then how it can move means it can only slightly disturbed, that's all. It cannot move first of all. It will be slightly disturbed in its original position, and then it will stay away from the original position, little bit away from. That means the charges are not free, means the charges are bounded electron. We say that it is bounded. So that bounded is what I am going to use a B here. Okay, so any charge that is going to stay inside the dielectric material will be a bound charge, and therefore the charge density is known as bounded charge density. So we will call this as bounded surface charge density, and this one is the bounded volume charge density. So this is how we can give the terminology. And once these things are clear, this board is full, we'll move to a different place and then write down the conclusion. So now we have come to the conclusion. Let me therefore write down finally. We have the expression for the electric potential given by two terms. Of course, there are two terms. Let me write down the first term. Over the surface, and now I will say that the bound sigma b. So that is what I am writing. Now I am eliminating the p dot n. That is what it is. Similarly, you write down the second term, and this time you write down the rho b. And that's all. But remember, sigma b, rho b should be equivalent to that value. You should not forget that. We have a p dot n, right? P dot n should not be forgotten, or you should not discard it. It will be there. But if you write like this, things are clear. So things are clear means what is clear? I already explained, right? I'll write down. What is clear is the first quantity highlighted in white color represent the electric potential due to a surface charge density. The same explanation, just I am writing. Similarly, if you are coming to the one that is highlighted in green color, then we say that corresponds to the electric potential due to a volume charge density. Volume charge density. So that is clear. But once again, we would like to know what kind of charge density. As I already explained, each one of the charge is not free to move. Therefore, it is better to say bound charge. In case of electrical conductor, you can say free charge density. It is free charge. Now we will write it down bound charge. Okay, that's clear. It is not free to move as in the case of metals, metal or conductor, whatever you like. That's all about it. And that's all. So this is our main conclusion. So whatever we have written now in this board, that is the conclusion of the today's classwork. And this forms important calculation. Of course, this particular expression forms the basis for some problem. Okay, sometimes they will ask you a problem. Okay, determine the what is the problem is determine the surface charge density and determine the volume charge density corresponding to a given polarization. That will be the question. That means polarization will be given to you. The question is calculate rho b and calculate sigma b. That will be the question, and the answer is quite simple. You don't have to do any integration. Nothing is to be done. The answer is quite simple. What is that you have to do is that you'll have to evaluate. What is that you'll have to evaluate is you evaluate p dot n. That's all, you get the answer. Then you evaluate divergence of p. So you should know how to calculate the normal component of the polarization. You should also know how to evaluate the divergence of the polarization vector. That's all about it. If you know that, then this kind of a problem can be solved. Okay. In case if they already give you exact values of the sigma by rho b, sometimes you can also evaluate the integral. Okay. When the geometries are fairly simple, like in the case of a spherical or cylindrical, some well-defined surfaces are there which are highly symmetric, then the evaluation of the integral is also going to be fairly simple. So this is the foundation theory for calculation of the electric potential due to a polarized object. Okay, that is the answer. It is the electric potential due to a polarized object. Of course, if you take the negative gradient of this, you will get the electric field. As I already told you in the beginning of the class, if you take negative gradient of the entire expression, then you get the electric field due to the polarized object. So that can be done as and when you require. Okay. unless and until you complete the evaluation of this for a particular problem, we don't want to jump into taking the negative gradient. So until that, we will keep only the electric potential version. When a specific problem is given to you, for that specific problem, you first finish the simplification of the integral and then get an expression. For that expression, take the negative gradient. That means gradient you first take, then attach a minus sign. That's all about it. If you take that, then that will represent the electric field. So V will be converted to the capital E vector. So this is the standard procedure for doing the calculation. So let us therefore stop here. Okay. And then probably in the next class, we can discuss how the Maxwell equation will be written down corresponding to a material medium. Material medium means dielectric medium, because we are talking about the bound charges in a dielectric, and dielectric is getting polarized. Therefore, how to write down the Maxwell equation in presence of the material medium. That means in presence of dielectric medium. So that we will see in the next class.